Welcome to Raise Nation Radio, the podcast for nonprofit movers, shakers, and change makers. We are here to fuel your passion with a daily dose of fundraising inspiration while keeping the conversations and connections from the annual Raise Conference alive all year long. Tune in for fresh perspectives, bold strategies, and the hottest trends lighting up the nonprofit world. Whether you're just starting out or a seasoned pro, buckle up. Each episode is packed with lively discussions, expert insights, and creative solutions to help you make an even bigger impact. Now get ready for another exciting episode. Please welcome your host from One Cause, Dawn Lego.
Welcome back to Raise Nation Radio. So glad you're joining us today. And whether you've been with us from the very start or tuning in for the very, very, very first time, we're grateful to connect with you on our podcast channel. I can't even get that out. Today's episode promises to be a meaningful one, talking to somebody new in the industry, or at least new to me, I should say. And we're just going to go into a really great story and have conversations with our incredible guests. So without further ado, please get comfortable out there, Raise Nation. Let's just jump right in. I am welcoming to the show, and please help me welcome Nick Fitz. He is from Momentum. He is the CEO and founder, and we got a lot of great things to talk about, don't we, Nick? Welcome to Raise Nation Radio.
Thanks for having me, Dawn. I'm super excited to chat with you today.
Yeah, and you just got back from Australia, back into the States, right? So you're a little jet lagged, I assume?
I am, yeah. I came back. I was there just for 4 days with some Black Bud folks with some, sort of larger universities and hospitals. And it was, 15 hours there and 15 hours back.
Oh,
and then I had a retreat on my feelings. And so now I'm just feeling,
you don't know what you're feeling.
It's been a long week, but I'm happy to
goodness.
be, I'm feeling good to be home is what I'm feeling.
Yeah, I would be right along with you. I love to travel, but I don't, if you know what I mean, like the whole process of getting there and getting back. But 15, that's brutal. Yeah. Well, but shout out to our Black Bud friends there. I just saw them at the AFP lead, so that was fun. I saw some of them. They were speaking and exhibiting, so hope you had a successful trip. Well, you know what? We put the cart before the horse here, right? I think we want our audience to get to know you a little bit more and get in touch with, your feelings there. So say hi to Raise Nation Radio, and if you don't mind, just introducing yourself and whatever you want to share. We'd love to hear from Nick and what you got going on at Momentum.
Yeah, it's a good open-ended question.
I'm good at those.
I'm happy to be here. Definitely, there's a lot of topics, and I know just a lot of values we're aligned on, and also ways of approaching sort of fundraising in the world. I'm happy to talk about obviously what we build and why, and this sort of thing. And I think very generally what I'm interested in is people and their relationships. And so that's been always true for me. I also have always been frustrated with the ways I've had to maintain them. Like I've lived in a lot of places. I've been in academia, emailing and text and trying to catch up with different people has always been frustrating for me. I've raised money both in nonprofits and universities, and then now as a venture-backed company, and it's all the same stuff. Like, we're communicating with current, say, funders or people we work with and trying to find new ones. And that process has been endlessly frustrating to me, like emails and texts and having stuff stored in some database. And then I got to follow up with this and that. And I love the people part of it, and the administration part of it. Maybe I don't love so much. And then, I've done it in different ways over the years. And then now building stuff for people that have these problems has just been super fun because it's back to, again, the people stuff. And then being able to talk to people, say, hey, what do you wake up stressed about or frustrated by? Let's also dig into exactly how you work, and then make something where they're like, oh, wow, this is so helpful is probably just the best. Doing that with a small group of people that also love doing that has been sort of the best work of my life. It's been really great.
So you're all about the connections, right? You're a connections guy.
I do. Yeah. I mean, I think no one on there you can look at all this work on what do people say on their deathbed? And we all know they don't say, I wish I had hit another OKR or I, raised another $1 million. They're the
so
people
true.
that I met.
Yeah.
And that's true. That's also at the heart of why people do anything, like why people buy anything or give anything or spend time. Like there's limited time and money, and how do you spend them? And people tend to do that with people that they love, like, or really connect with in one way or the other.
Yeah, my daughter has a saying, she uses it all the time, that we're just a collection of the people we meet. And that's so true, right?
It's really true.
Simple, but yet deep, but so true. So before we jump into some questions, I just want to pick your brain. We're going to talk about the donor psychology a little bit and how that plays into fundraising, a lot more into fundraising than we would expect. And then that little topic that nobody kind of thought too much about just this January, and now it's all they talk about. 2 little letters, AI. Just drop that in there. But before we do, can we get the elevator pitch for Momentum? Like, who are you, what you do? Let's just get that. I'm curious. Give us the 30-second or 30+ second elevator pitch.
Yeah. I guess the way to think about it maybe is to start with the problem that I was describing of, like, everyone's trying to find donors, right? Or find people that can support them in one way or another, then cultivate them, then have them actually give in some way or another, commit to some gift, and then keep them up to date or steward them. And that process involves a ton of different tools and workflows and stuff, basically, and schleps. And so we make, we could call it an operating system. It ends up looking like an inbox and then a bunch of sort of like things that a chief of staff would do for you. So what we end up doing is connecting to everyone's CRM and email and calendar and all this. And we have these interviews with people where we're like, we do a bunch of analysis of how do you currently sort of run your pipeline, and how do you want to, and do you want to hit up people when they get a new job on LinkedIn or when they exit a company or stuff like this. And then we take your existing donor plans and all of the kind of, research that we're like, maybe you should do this or shouldn't, but basically then give you an inbox that says, your goal is to raise $25 million by the end of the year. What's your next most valuable action? So you need to respond to this email from someone furthest down the funnel, or respond to this text, or you're headed to New York. In a month, you need to send out these 18 emails. And so then we basically help you figure out what to do next, then take action on it. So send emails or texts or any of that kind of thing. And then we'll give you a bunch of the intelligence and stuff in there, so you don't need to open a bunch of things. We write it all back up to your CRM. It's connected to all of your tools. And then we'll do things like email you or text you saying, hey, you need to respond to this person. Or after we have this meeting, it'll text me and say what happened, and I'll leave a voice note. And it'll say, well, what are your next steps and next step date, and get a contact report up there. And so it's doing different pieces of the puzzle, but meeting you where you are, sort of where you already in your text, or where you already operate.
Thus giving that nonprofit momentum. Is that fair?
Sure, that is. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I guess the name of the company is No Accident, right? Very intentional.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. It's a thing you hear often just in fundraising, where a lot of it's around sort of FOMO, like I need to raise this amount of money by this date for this reason. And the things that drive things sort of over the finish line tends to be momentum.
Yeah. I kind of like this, right? It's kind of like coming into your office and having an assistant that's backed by my personal goals, aligned with, where I want to go, and telling me with some data and intelligence, what are the actionable steps I need to be prioritizing today to get to that goal? Because we all know the, Covey Eisenhower decision matrix, right?
Yeah.
Urgent, what's important. Well, I think sometimes in nonprofit world, everything's urgent and everything is important, right?
That's
but
right.
At the end of the day, is that going to help you march to whatever budget you've set for yourself so that you can grow your impact in your programming? But if I had this little voice helping me with my momentum, telling me what is urgent, what is important, what I should be doing now, kind of like that. So very cool.
Right. I will say you described it well, where it's built around your plan. A big part of what we're trying to do is just make it easier for you to do what you want to do. Like there's a gap between how you would like to operate your program and how you actually do. And then you figure out what to do. And then half of it is in like sending you a text or just making it easy to send the email or the mail merge, right? Like so much of it is just making the action very seamless or easy, right? You send an email, it's already written out, the text or WhatsApp, it's already in your CRM, like that. There's so many pieces of the process that are unnecessarily manual or just psychologically frustrating.
Yeah,
like
mitigates the risk. Yeah. And it's part of that part that it's creating that part that you like, the connection part, not the administration part. You're taking care of the administration part. Oh, I love it. We're
Right.
going to get all of this into the show notes if you don't mind. So I have
Sure.
a funny feeling people are going to be knocking on your door like, okay, tell me more how I can get momentum too. Right. So that's awesome. All right. So we do have some topics to dive into. I just was curious. Right. So I wanted to ask a little bit about momentum. But before we get to that juicy stuff, you mentioned being an academic, and now this is a startup, right? Momentum,
Yeah.
you're the
Momentum
founder
is
of
a
a startup.
startup.
So how did you transition from that? I'm just curious. A little birdie told me there's a funny story. And so want to share that?
I don't know what the funny story is, but it's I'm happy that it's happened. In some ways, I think I had fallen into academia. So I grew up in DC. My parents were in their 80s and 70s now, worked in the federal government. And I don't know that I thought about being much of anything when I grew up. I thought I might like walk dogs and, teach high school basketball or something. And I like to do fun things. Like I would, go to like auctions I would go and sell stuff on eBay, or I figured out ways to make enough money to live, something like this. But I did philosophy and policy in undergrad, and then I came back and worked in DC at think tanks and in New York on technology policy. And then I ended up going to get a job at the University of British Columbia doing what was called neuroethics, but it was ethical, legal, and social implications of new technology. A lot of it ended up to be like online studies towards people's attitudes towards different complicated topics, like sort of drugs for enhancement, like do pilots or surgeons use this, or what are the risks, or these kinds of questions, or just new technology, how should it be regulated? I thought a lot of these questions were interesting. I kind of fell into academia. Then I ended up doing a PhD there at UBC and then spending a year at Oxford. And then I decided to leave, close to the end of it. Partially just because I was like, it had gone well. We had published a bunch of stuff that had been cited well, and I started to feel the feedback loops are very long. And I'm sure a lot of us feel this is true in fundraising also in some ways. But, you do a small thing, some other thing would happen. And I used to think that similarly, like a heart transplant came from all this work over 50 years, and that's great, but so much work happens, and then it's just like, there's really no outcome of it, or it just takes so long to come out that it's irrelevant. And even we were doing a lot of applied work, but I guess the short story is I just felt like I didn't, the theory of change wasn't mine, or wasn't one that I was excited by. And then I left and ended up going to get a job at Duke with this guy, Dan Ariely. He's done a lot of work on a lot of things. I came in running a research program on the attention economy, and so how phones affect mental health, stuff like batching notifications,
My.
all of this. And it was, I was interested in the scale of this. And then how I ended up coming into this is that I ran the research program on the psychology of giving. And so how to rich people give their money away, how do they invest and donate, and then the psychology of fundraisers, which is now incredibly relevant to what we make. But, this was at the time in 2016. And then, I had done some stuff on Get Out the Vote. And then the thing that led to this is I started to run something called the Startup Lab, at Duke, where we invested in early stage startups. And then we teach them how to apply sort of behavioral science to their product, like defaults or onboarding, or how to think about the user psychology and how you build an environment, and then in their growth. So in testing messages or in framing some of what they were doing. And, I kind of just fell in love with the idea of like, you ask people why 3 times, or you talk to people and say, what do you wake up stressed about or go to sleep frustrated by? And they'll tell you something, and you're like, well, what about this or that? And that back and forth, I really enjoy, and then realized, you could build things quickly actually. And so then I started a company, I guess this was in 2018, that's been through different iterations, we'll say, but it was a very different thing then, and has gone through a couple of different changes.
It's evolved.
Yes, it's evolved.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the landscape has evolved too since 2018 to now. I mean, I've never seen so much change, so it makes sense that you would evolve along with it. Well, you just have a fascinating background. And I just wanted to kind of dive into that, but I certainly see how momentum can be so impactful and powerful to the nonprofit space, just given it seems like all the different stages of your very fascinating background has all been rooted in connection. And perhaps you drew a little bit from each phase to bring it to the nonprofit space. So super, super
I hope so.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a nice way to, that's a charitable way to frame it. So I
We'll
like that
go
a
with
lot.
that then. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get into some topics that I know our audience is definitely going to be super excited to hear your perspective on. And let's just talk about behavioral psychology and how that, what role does that have in fundraising? I'm super curious to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah. What role? I guess I think about it as central to almost every interaction, right? It's not so different in buying as it is in fundraising as it is in just any behavior or any kind of human connection. I think there's been a ton of work on this, right? Or a lot of work, not just in psychology or behavioral science, but in, economics, in neuroscience. I mean, many fields in sociology, many people have looked at giving and why do people do it. And many of the reasons I think are intuitive, but, and maybe that's a lot of really good research is just like validating things we feel intuitively. But, some of the big things that, are looked at, and there's a meta-analysis that I can share with you after that you can put in the show notes or a bunch of good links here. But,
Please. Yeah. We'll put it all in the show notes.
Sure. Great. People tend to give for a variety of reasons, but you see essentially that, they give to feel good, right? There's this sort of warm glow that we talk about, and there's a lot of evidence on this of, you give $100,000, it doesn't feel 100 times better than giving $1,000 actually, and giving small gifts. And how do you generate a warm glow in people and connect people to the impact and generally to people that work at the org or to the recipients? People give because they want to look good, right? There's reputational things. People want their names on buildings, right? Or they want to signal to other people that they're good people, essentially. And this isn't to discount. People give because they want to make a difference, of course. Like it's a core. There's some good work showing that like people are intuitively cooperative. That and it makes sense. Like 300,000 years of groups of 150, we've gotten we rely on each other, like as people, and so giving strengthens that connection. And people once they give are more likely to vote.
Community.
Right, exactly, and that has effects. And you do see some of this, right? There's some arguments that giving locally is also about helping yourself, right? Or to your school, or that it's tied to this, but it also just builds community with people around you. And there's some interesting work on how do we build community globally, actually, like how do you connect people to people around the world? People also give the sort of like self-signaling to reinforce their values. Like it feels good to have internal consistency and to say, this is the sort of person I am, as somebody who makes a difference in the world. And so people give, and then you feel, that way of it. And then there are, people give for lots of different reasons, and there's different kinds of people as well. People give because they want to feel connected to their mom. Like, my mom has various health issues. Let's say my mom has Parkinson's. And so, you could say, I want to give to a place that does Parkinson's research. You could also say, I want to give to a place that does generally mental health stuff and the National Academy for Mental Health, right? Or you could tie that to different causes, right? But people tend to want to feel connected to it. Some people give because they care essentially about the costs and benefits, right? That they're like, how there's limited time and money, how much suffering can I reduce? So sort of within different cause areas, what does more or less. Yeah. And I don't, maybe something to say about it is I think people will say, oh, people give because they want to be heroes, or there's just like a cynical view on it. And then there's a very altruistic view that people give because they just care so much about the world. But things tend to be, maybe more mixed up than that. And I think people give all these things we've just talked about here show up differently for different people at different times in their lives.
Yeah. So how does a nonprofit leverage that, right? How do you capture in a bottle, if you will, this, psychology to grow grow your impact? What advice would you have to nonprofits?
It's a good question. There's some things, I guess one other thing that's worth saying is people give when it's easy, right? People give when they're asked. So we can say, no one wakes up and it's like desperately, how do I give $100 away today? Like this has to happen this second, right? And people tend to give when they're, this is obvious when there's like a huge earthquake and there's a lot of asking going on, but people give when a friend asks them, right, or somebody else. And so, there is something to like making thoughtful asks, but generating impressions or getting out with people. And then, on the other side of that, people give when it's very easy. And so there are some very applicable things around default, say, or when you hit let's say, as an example, I hit your website, and I'm somebody who's a mid-level giver and I'm interested. I've already had 4 or 5 touches with you. I'm not thinking, I want to give, $5,000 or $10,000. How will I go do that? Say give with stock or something like this. And I'll go to the site and it's hard to find the button. And then I hit there and it says call this
Too
person.
many barriers.
And I'm like, let me just not call them. Right. And so just making defaults, like thinking thoughtfully about what the defaults are for different users and what are their journeys, and really just thinking every page you add adds, 9% drop off, and, the language you use around it and all of this, I think is just trying to put yourself in the user's perspective, where there's a friend of a friend who runs some company that's like it's called The User is Drunk, and he'll like get drunk and test your study or test your product. The point of it is just like we have very little attention. If you look at when you visit any new product or any website, like you're not like, let me read everything about it and go through it, right? You click through it, see some things and leave.
Get the highlights, right? Make a decision.
Right.
I'm interested or not. And
exactly. And so just think about your users the way you operate on other websites in some way and try to build for that. And then there's, another simple example is around social proof, that like when you send out a letter, the like famous example of this is the UK government, probably just about 20 years ago now. But it was very famous at the time when they were trying to get people to pay their taxes on time. And they spent all this money and time trying to figure it out. And then they just added one line to the letter that went out to people saying, 92% of your neighbors pay their taxes on time. And now suddenly everybody else does this. And so that's a more punitive way to think about it. But I think just showing that there's other people involved, we have these sorts of donors, this support, I think people tend to feel uncomfortable about that, but really it's back to community. Like you just want to feel like you're part of something. And so saying, we've done this, here's the collective impact, here are other sorts of people that, you can talk to, even connecting potential donors to current donors, right? Or like that sort of thing. I think the like social proof or the connection to other people, is really simple and easy to do, but people tend not to say connect donors or that kind of thing. But it's one of the most effective ways to get somebody,
we say that,
to do something.
We say that our product here at OneCause, connects nonprofits with their donors. That's part of our tagline.
That's right. So, well, I'm thinking about donor to donor, right? Because I'm thinking,
donor to donor,
when you
peer
get
to peer. Okay, sorry.
And not peer-to-peer giving even, but just bringing you into community, right? So like when you get an ad, you're X% likely to buy a product, like 0.1%. But when a friend tells you, hey, buy this, I use it and love it, you're like, it's like 10 or 20 or 100 times more likely to do that.
Better when they say
it's not so different when you can, say you have a donor who really loves your work and somebody else who's similar to them or affiliated to them or went to their school or worked in a similar place. Connecting them is really valuable.
I see. Okay. Making sense. Yeah. And I know what you're saying is true. Here at OneCause, we just introduced a research study just last week, actually. It was the Giving Experience Study, the 5th edition of it. And one of the top motivators, one of 3, was for giving, is the ease of giving. So what you say is making sense. If people are genuinely altruistic and generally seeking connection and community and coming together for the greater good, and that automatically opens their wallet or their pocketbook, then you have to reduce any and all barriers to giving, because if that's an inherent gift that we all have to some degree, let's make it easy for them. And that did show up in the research study, that is a top motivator for the actual gift. Was it easy? Did I come to the website, click that button, or is there digital wallet or less clicks or whatever the case was? Can I, donate from my DAF account? Can I donate my stocks? Like whatever I have to give, did you make it easy for me, nonprofit? So that's a great message and so timely and relevant to the research study that we personally put out into the wild. So
nice.
Love what you're saying there. So let's talk just a little bit about, we spoke in the beginning of this episode how your journey since 2018, which isn't that long ago, has just kind of evolved but it's not the only thing that involved. The landscape in the nonprofit space has certainly involved more so than I've ever seen it. So one of those introductions is definitely AI. And how do we now weave that in, right, into fundraising? And how can we leverage that and what we know about behavior psychology? And how do we put this all together, right? This modern AI world, which makes things efficient and sometimes smarter. But yet, are we using AI in the right way that we're tapping into the psychology, right? There's just so many things at play. Can you bring it all together for us?
I can try.
Okay, I think you can do
Yeah.
it.
I think one way I almost want to start is that I feel about AI, or at least around the conversation around AI, in the same way I think I feel about the Bay Area, right, or Silicon Valley. Like, I grew up in DC, and there's just a ton of noise out here, like useless stuff and claims that people are changing the world. I'm like, but do you know how big the government is actually? And all of this stuff, we'll say. And then there's like incredible progressive change, right? I mean, the internet, like, there's so much, it is like at the edge of innovation. And I don't mean in some big, like, meaningless way, just, really interesting things are built here by interesting people. And so I have a complicated relationship with living here, and with AI maybe similarly, where there's a lot of hype around what is essentially an awesome tool, and not enough, maybe, like, or a lot of noise and not enough signal around how do you use it well. And definitely, like any huge innovation, like cloud computing, or, this is true about whaling in the past, or cars, or lots of things, there will be, jobs that are lost and jobs that are created. But a lot of it is like, well, how do you use it well? And I think maybe that point, that it's a tool and people use it well, will benefit. And those who don't will struggle. But, it will, I think it's important not to just be like, oh, everything will be fine. Like, there's huge risks associated with it, like around bias and around the labor market, and more existential ones around sort of values alignment. But at least in our world of fundraising, and a friend and advisor of ours, Nathan, runs something called Fundraising. Nathan Chappelle runs fundraising.ai, that's asking a lot
He's a
of
good
these
friend of
questions.
ours. Yes, he's been on our
Yeah.
podcast.
Great. Yeah, he's fantastic. And he's thinking, along with Mallory and others, very thoughtfully about, what's the role in our world here. And I think maybe the thing to say about that is that it should ideally help us, like, save time, and work on and not be able to do things that we didn't want to do, or that are very frustrating to us, and spend more time with people. Like, it's a tool that
Back to
ideally
connections
helps us
again.
connect back to people, right? Like,
Yep.
it's viewed in this cold way. And I think it can be used it's like any dual use technology. Like, there are, dystopian ways of using it, but there's ways, like maybe like the internet and many other things that really sort of improve our lives, or bring a lot more connection to them. In the same way that, like, I can FaceTime my mom and feel really connected to her, even though we live on other separate coasts. How AI shows up sort of really practically, right? Because, I think it's helpful just to say, like, what do we actually mean, and what's happening, and how do we use it? And you can do all these things without our product, right? And sort of Frankenstein it together. But there's, I think maybe three simple ways to think about how it's most helpful in our world, and in anyone's world who's building relationships. But one is around sort of who you should reach out to and when, and, how much you should ask for them. And this is, it was often called machine learning. It's really just like advanced graduate. You could use stats for it before there was ML, and now AI. And this is like, it's often called like predictive analytics or something, right? That's like, here's a bunch of more, here's what we know about donors. Here's a model. Here's more stuff. We think these things about them. We think you should ask them for that about here. We think you should reach out to them at these times. And, you should email this person instead of texting them, or that sort of thing. And so we'll build that. And then the thing that's created a lot of hype, right? Or sort of this cycle around it has been generative AI, has been the ability for it to, like, this, so far it's been large language models. There's different competing architectures, but it's essentially things that read or take in a bunch of information and then generate stuff for you, right? So it's making images and writing code and writing books and all of that. And that stuff is very polarizing, right? I think that stuff is the stuff I'm least bullish on, or something like that. When I use our product, I'm happy with just templates and snippets and existing things. When I do use it, I use it in ways that are very constrained, where it's like, write this in my tone. And of course it does do that very well because it's read all my emails, right? Or, right. Or, bring on, draft something at the beginning that's about something relevant to them recently, right? A new article that came out that I know they're interested in or that the system thinks they are, but even there where it might bring up an article for them or mention something about the weather or congratulating them on a promotion, there it's so important to get people the context, right? Or say why we're recommending this, right? Because it's a very uncanny thing for the thing to write something on your behalf, right? And there is this work on this like uncanny valley of, when you do that, I think it's so important to get people the context, essentially, of why the thing is drafting this or why it's recommending talk to them about this or that, especially when it's, touching communication, which has historically been just really human to human. And so there we're very careful with it, or we give users a bunch of control. And there people have seen it used this way. And I don't know that it's necessarily the best or most helpful thing. Like in my own use of it, as I said, it's not huge. And then the third one is what people call sort of automatic speech recognition or more commonly natural language processing, where essentially it's the ability to talk to something and have it talk back to you, right? And so after this, let's say we were on an investor or donor call now, the system would text me on my phone and then I'd leave a voice note, right? And I could talk back to it and we could interact that way, or it can text back and forth, but just the ability to listen to this call and summarize it, right? And there's been a rise of all of that part is incredibly helpful as well to capture sort of a description and a summary. But again, the context is important to ask the user, well, what's your next step and what's the next step date, right? Because it can't pull out, well, what do you want to do with it, right? And so it's important to think about all these things as like ways of supporting you and your goals, right? But basically just as that.
Yeah. I think what I've learned this year is that AI just needs a seat at the table, right? It's not a matter of if we're going to use it. It's a matter of how we're going to use it. I love Nathan Chappell's messaging, just being responsible with your use of AI. And you definitely can find a layer to make yourself efficient and effective without dehumanizing, right? And and making sure that you don't lose what's absolutely most important, which is the connection and the community. So it's how you use it. And to go from, 0 to 120 and hit the Autobahn and, try to capture AI in a day, right? Like, let's AI in a bottle and let's figure this all out today. That's not going to happen. It's really just like you're developing an employee or anything else. You really have to figure out its seat at the table to just refine what you're doing, not replace what you're doing.
Exactly. It helps people imagine that, it gave you some context on me coming into this meeting and it linked you out to places and it caveated it and it found some of this research. It's not that you're not going to watch any of the videos or read past things I've done, but it's maybe helping organize it, right? Or you can ask questions back and forth. I think there's important ways where it helps us kind of connect to each other more. And when you really look at what somebody does every day and ask them, would you want to do this or that? Or, this spreadsheet, do you want to have to fill out all these rows, even small things that we don't think about as this? It's sort of how you deploy it.
Yeah, of course. Well, I think what's interesting, just in the last few seconds that we have, I want to make an observation. At every turn that we picked up a new topic, it was all rooted in connection. Just who you are, your introduction, your journey from academic to being a founder of Momentum's evolution, ask you about donor psychology, ask you about AI. No matter where we went in this conversation, it was really rooted in connection and community. And that's certainly what we're doing in the nonprofit sector, right? We're trying to build those connections and community. And I certainly love how you pointed out the donor to donor connection. And really, that's the definition of the communities that we're trying to build. So it's really fascinating.
Yeah. Thanks. I think so much of everything comes back to connection and trust. And I think we could stand to do that more with our donors, with our employees, our board, the recipients and stakeholders. Like it's hard to create connection, especially under tight budgets and under stress. But
and so many hats that they're wearing.
That's the
but you know what? You make a good point. If you invite AI to have a seat at the table, then you'll have more time to steward the connections in the community that you're trying to build. Yeah.
Right.
Well, super exciting.
Right.
You're definitely the company to be watching, right? So we all want to watch Momentum. We're going to get all of this into the show notes. And what nonprofit doesn't want more momentum, right? I mean, that's just the name of the game. So thanks for joining today for sure. And just, imparting some of your wisdom and journey and connecting the dots for us. No pun intended. I'm going to go there. Yeah. Definitely pun intended. So I think we're going to be hearing a lot more from you this coming, rest of this year and coming in 2025. So we'll keep a watch. Maybe we'll have you back on Raise Nation Radio or on one of our webinars, or I'm sure you have. Maybe we can get that trifecta going. What did you mention? Mallory Erickson, right? Nathan Chappelle. And Nick Fitz. That sounds like a webinar in the making.
That's
to
fun.
me.
Hey, we would love to do it. I won't speak for them, but I would love to do this.
Okay, we'll have all your people call me. I don't have people, so all you need to do is just call me.
Figure it out.
We'll figure it out. Yeah. So.
And thanks for having me here, Don. I wanted to say this was. I really loved talking to you. It was. You can have this conversation could go in lots of different ways, and be more tactical or strategic, or be maybe more even heady, but I really appreciated how much it came back to connection and how thoughtful your questions were. And so just thanks for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, well, thank you. And say hi to everyone over there at Momentum, my friend Dom. And try to keep your feet on the ground. I don't know, 30 hours of flying in a course of, 5 days is probably, definitely not my cup of tea. So hopefully you're here in the States for a little while.
Yeah, no, I'm here. I'm happy to be back.
Yeah, if there's any special links that you want to send over my way, I'll definitely get them in the show notes. But thank you for just connecting yourself to our Raise Nation audience. And hopefully we'll get to talk to you again real soon. But bye for now. Bye, Raise Nation. Say goodbye to Nick. Fearless Fundraisers, that's a wrap for today. A heartfelt thank you to our guests for sharing their stories, insights, and expertise. And to you, our fantastic audience, for everything you do to build brighter tomorrows in our communities. We hope today's content inspires you to amplify your mission and grow your impact. Don't forget to join us for new episodes every Thursday, wherever you listen to your podcasts, or catch us on YouTube and on demand at onecause.com. And before we go, we'd love your help in growing this podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please like, follow, and subscribe to Raise Nation Radio. Share it with a friend, and please leave us a review so we can continue delivering content that inspires and empowers. Raise Nation Radio is produced in partnership with One Cause, your go-to for digital fundraising solutions that connect nonprofits with their donors and drive results. Visit onecause.com or scan the QR code to schedule a one-to-one with their fundraising experts and explore the latest tools and innovations to help you reach more and raise more. Plus, be sure to check out their extensive catalog of free resources to support your mission. All the links are in the show notes. Raise Nation Radio is inspired by the annual Raise Conference, presented by One Cause. We'd love to see you in person at the next Raise event in September. It's a 2-day experience featuring over 35 CFRE accredited sessions, dynamic speakers, and the latest innovations from our sponsor pavilion, and priceless networking opportunities. And while you're there, don't miss the Fearless Fundraiser Party. It's where memories are made and lifelong friendships are formed. Secure your spot today at onecause.com/raise. The link is also in the show notes. Until next time, thank you for tuning in, and as always, stay fearless.